Anyway, so considering we're on the tax debate stage right now, we're going to introduce John Peschong, who's District 1 Supervisor, and he's been staunchly for fair taxes and removing taxes that are unjust and unfair. So that's why we like him so much. I also like his haircut. And he's going to be talking to us about what's going on with Proposition 13. Everybody knows what Proposition 13 is, the property tax legislation that went through that protects all of us from paying exorbitant property taxes. And what's happening with ACA 1 in Sacramento is they're trying to pass a law to kind of shift that. So we gotta work against that. So I'm sure John will go into that in detail and let us know what's going on. John Peschong, thank you.
Hello, how are y'all doing? Randall was right, I did not go to the convention this year. I formerly was the executive director of the California Republican Party in 1992, 3, 4, and 5, and 6. And my wife used to actually run the state party conventions that you all went to in Anaheim. But I'm a football dad, so I spend every Friday with my senior from Templeton High School going to football games. And this Friday we played down in Lompoc against Cabrillo High School. Templeton High School beat them 61-14. So it was a good day. So, but the real test is going to be this Friday, 7 o'clock in Templeton at the high school there against the Atascadero Greyhounds, which were state champions last year. So we'll be seeing if we can hold up to them, but we've done pretty well. We played a couple Bakersfield teams. We beat West High School, we beat East High School. So we're right now sitting on a 4-2 record. So we'll see what happens. But that's why I wasn't at the convention. So I chose my family over my politics. Please forgive me. But some days that's what you got to do. So as many of you know, I'm from San Luis Obispo County here, from Templeton, California. And I am the first district supervisor. I'm in my second term. I've been there 7 years. We're coming up on 7 years. And this last year, I've been the chairman of the board. I was also the chairman of the board my first 2 years when Lynn and Debbie made me the chairman because Adam Hill was going to be chairman, so they voted for me instead, and I voted for myself, and so I got to become chairman. And that really made Adam mad. And I'm actually kind of proud of that. If I could put that on a resume, something, or on my website, but that people ask me, what was the highlight been so far? And it's the fact that I was chairman for the first 2 years. And we did a lot of good stuff. But I'll tell you that it's interesting because we can't really necessarily affect statewide tax policy, but we can take positions on tax policies in our legislative platform. So we have a platform, and your tax dollars actually go to hiring lobbyists. If you don't know this, we have a lobbyist in Sacramento, and we have a lobbyist in Washington, D.C. And they go and they present to the California delegation in D.C. or the Assembly and Senate in Sacramento what the people of San Luis Obispo believe. And for the last 7 years, we have had a plank that says we do not support anything that would overturn the protections of Proposition 13. So Proposition 13 came about on June 6th, 1978. It was a constitutional amendment. So it locked it into stone, and it was approved by the voters. And the most significant portion of the act is the first paragraph, which limits the tax rate for real estate. And I'm just going to read it to you so you know exactly what it says, so we're all on the same page. The maximum amount of any ad valorem tax on real property shall not exceed 1% of the full cash value of such property. The 1% tax to be collected by the counties and apportioned according to the law to the districts within the counties. The proposition decreased property taxes by asserting values at their 1976 value. So if you've been in your house since 1976, you are assessed on that value. And restricted annual increases of an assessed value of a property to an inflation factor not to exceed 2% a year. It was going up 4% and 5% before that. And so what it was doing was removing seniors could not, if you're on a fixed income, you've paid off your house after 40 years of hard work, and then it was taking you up 5% a year on your property tax, and you weren't able to meet ends meet, so you had to, what did you have to do? You had to sell your house, move into an apartment. And as you know, I mean, you worked very, very hard. We all work very, very hard for our homes. And so the other thing it did, it prohibits reassessment of the new base value year except in cases of change of ownership or completion of new construction. These rules apply equally to all real estate, residential, and here's the kicker, and commercial, which is a really big deal. Because last cycle, so last year, and I say cycle a lot because I'm a political consultant too, so we think in 2-year cycles. Last year they tried to actually remove commercial property so it could be assessed at a higher rate. Now, how many of you know a small business that's been in business 30 or 40 years where the owner actually owns their building, and now they wanted to remove that, right? Ed knows that. So they wanted to remove that so they could charge you 10%, a 10% increase. You'd lose your business, not your business, but your business location at least, your commercial property, which is an investment for the company. So it does that. And the second thing that it did, the other significant portion, and this is actually something that Jimmy Paulding, and I think you all know Supervisor Paulding, he does not understand this because he supports what we call ACA 1, which is a constitutional amendment that will be on your ballot most likely next November. And what it's going to do is it's going to remove this portion. The other significant portion of Proposition 13 is that it requires a 2/3 majority in both legislative houses for future increases in any state taxes or amounts of revenue collected, including income tax rates. It also requires 2/3 vote majority in local elections for local governments wishing to increase special taxes. A special tax is a tax devoted specifically to a purpose, i.e. a homeless tax or a road repair money that does not go into general fund. And so what it does is it takes away the 2/3 and it would lower it, ACA 1 would lower it to 55%, which is what the schools got, and Kenny can probably, they were able to get bonds lowered, so the threshold on a bond for a school district is 55%. Now, I'll give you an example here. In Templeton, there was a fire tax on the ballot 2 years ago. We did not have a full-time fire department. We had part-time fire department, part-time paramedics. So the city got together and said, or the town, it's not a city, the town, the CSD said, we would like to have a full-time fire department with paramedics 24/7. So what does that take? And they figured out a budget, and they actually had to get a 2/3 vote to be able to make that happen. And in Oceano, they've tried this 4 times. It's failed every time. You might remember about 7 years ago, there was a road tax on the ballot, and it was to raise money for roads. And it was a 2/3 vote with a sales tax increase. And it failed by 700 votes to get the 2/3. In Templeton, they got 76% of the vote. So it passed, and they were able to assess every property with a $200 fee to pay for a full-time fire department and paramedics, and it's what the people wanted. What the 2/3 does is really make people think about what they want. And so if you lower it to 55%, and like the sales tax 7 years ago, you're going to have a lot more taxes, not just getting rid of AC or getting rid of Prop 13, ACA 1, and getting rid of the 2/3, but you could put on there, and this is kind of a key here, because I just want you to understand, you may have heard a number of supervisors talk about, but it's for infrastructure. We need it for infrastructure. In the ACA 1, it does not tell you what they consider infrastructure. And so that could be salaries, by the way. And you all know that our Board of Supervisors just voted for a 26% salary increase. So maybe they're thinking they have to pay for their salary increase by raising taxes and taking more money from you. By the way, I voted against it, and I also did not accept it when it went through. But here's what it says. So ACA 1 allows government spending to be dictated as infrastructure despite there being a lack of definition of what infrastructure entails. It could be salaries or random programs. So now let's give you an example. You're about to get hit again with another self-help county tax. That will also be on the ballot in November, most likely. They're going to collect signatures for it very soon, so you'll see them in front of the grocery stores or in front of Walmart in Paso, and people will be gathering signatures, and they're going to call it Self-Help County. There's like 30 of them. They've all passed this, and what it does is it raises sales tax to pay for roads. So here's my argument. When Debbie, Lynn, and I first got elected, we took over the board majority. We put in place a goal. We have a list of 3 goals, and the top one was roads. That was going to be one of our number 1 priorities, and public safety number 2 priority, and mandated programs, which they come down from the state. I know it's hard to believe that the state would ever mandate things for us, but you all know how this state is run. All 40 million people are mandated every day by the state. But what happens is that they put this on the ballot because they took away, when Bruce took over, Bruce and Jimmy and Don, very nice people. However, I think their tax policy is a little crooked. What happened is they took over and they removed roads from the list. Okay? So they took roads off the list, and now our roads are suffering. Imagine that. It's only been 9 months and we have stopped spending money on roads. So and I always think go back to something that Bill Clinton always used to talk about: never let a good disaster go unused, right? So, okay, the roads are falling apart, so we got to raise taxes. We gave ourselves a 26% pay raise. We got to raise taxes. We took away water from small family farms in the Paso Basin. We got to raise taxes. All of these things are an excuse to figure out how to raise taxes. ACA 1, which is a state effort, what it will do is make it easier for people to do that continually at a 55% vote. And that's where it hurts Proposition 13, is because it takes away the 2/3 vote and it goes to what they called infrastructure. And you know that it's kind of funny that they don't put a definition of infrastructure into ACA 1, into a constitutional amendment, and that's because they want to spend the money any way they can. Now, there's probably going to be 3 or 4 other tax increases on the ballot. I will tell you, so we have the Self-Help County, which you heard about. There could be a TOT, increase, which is a transient occupancy tax, which is what visitors pay on their hotel rooms. You know that if you've ever traveled anywhere or you're just down in Anaheim, and I am sure you paid a whopping, probably 30% TOT, down in Anaheim, because they do everything for the resort district. But they want to raise the TOT because we have the lowest TOT. But here's the real kicker to me, because they do a lot of this in the name, we don't want to create more poor people. We want to be able to, you heard earlier, tax the rich, right? Make them pay more. And by the way, I think a flat tax would be the best tax of all, and on a postcard. So you put in how much money you made, you pay the fat tax, you sign the bottom of it, and you mail the postcard in. That's it. That's what you should be doing. But, and that's, I think, a big Milton Friedman from years ago. But I tell you, with all these different taxes, you could see 7 to 8 tax increases on the ballot next year. And our county is no longer opposing those tax increases in Sacramento, because that plank has been removed from our legislative platform. You heard Randall talk tonight about the platform of the California Republican Party. And I've been on the platform committee 20 years ago. I was also actively involved in the platform for the Republican National Committee a number of years at those conventions. But the one thing that's always been in that platform, besides the pro-life plank, which is always in the platform, and I hope that it stays always in the platform, but the one thing that's always in there is they support lower taxes and not taxing the middle class into oblivion. And that's where we're going. Because if they can lower this down to if you think about it, to 55%, and then a local municipality like San Luis Obispo County can come in and say, we want to raise property taxes by 10% this year because the economy, during the Trump administration, as you know, the economy was actually working. We actually made some money, and our houses were worth more, and we paid less taxes. If that happens, because it was a middle-class tax cut, if that happens and a new administration comes in here in San Luis Obispo County, they could come back and say, we're going to raise it 10% or 20%. Think about that. I don't know how much you all pay on your house, but I think I pay $5,000, $6,000 a year. So that's $3,000, in December, and $3,000, it's April, I think, right? You have to pay it by, so April. Okay, $6,000. Now, if we're going to go up 10, 15, 20%, it puts me at $12,000, 50, 100%. What's to stop them? What's to say that anybody who pays less than $10,000 in property taxes should now pay $20,000 in property taxes? Let's put it on the ballot and see. And the reason why these pass is because I believe we have, as you know, in California, we have the highest poverty rate of any state in America. We have more poor people in this state than anywhere else in America. And they want, a lot of those folks have been told that they need these programs to succeed. And so the only way to get programs is to tax the rich. And that's everybody in this room. Because they're a poverty level. And even on fixed income, if your property tax goes up, you're going to struggle. I mean, I don't know how many nights a week you eat top ramen, but double it. Because that's what you're talking about. As you're spending 99 cents on a dinner, which is not fair for somebody who's worked for 40 years to save and do the right thing. And so I bring this up tonight, and I wanted to talk about this, and it's great because thank you for the commercial that you ran all week, because I heard it 10 minutes before I got here, and so I got all excited because I was going to come hear myself talk. I'll tell you that, it obviously worked. KPRL, people listen to KPRL because you're all here, which is, it's a great radio station. But I wanted to tell you that I'm going to continue to fight. Debbie's going to continue to fight and to point out the fact that they're wrong when it comes to Proposition 13, wrong on ACA. And this is the thing. Supervisor Paulding said a couple times, very loudly and clear, that he supports Prop 13, but he wants to get rid of the 2/3. You can't have that position. That is categorically opposed, right? And so you can't say that. If you're going to lower the 2/3 threshold, you're against Prop 13, and I believe you're against our seniors. I believe you're against our families on fixed incomes. I believe that you're against our working families, because that's what it is. It's going to hurt our families. And I will tell you, and you all know this, when I first ran, I ran because I believe in smaller, more efficient government, lower taxes, and more personal freedom. And we're going to continue to fight for them. And if I can find the 3 votes, and I'll tell you, on our board, I don't think you'd be able to change the mind of Bruce Gibson, okay? I don't believe you can change the mind of Jimmy Paulding. I actually think with enough people calling Don Ortiz leg, but the problem has been, as you've seen, where she made a decision on one thing, and then Bruce yelled at her during a break, and then she came back to reconsider, which is legal, she can do that, and so she's on the wrong side of that issue. But what I'm going to recommend is that people come to our board meetings, and by the way, I'm the chairman for the next 6 meetings, and then Debbie will be the chair. Okay, so you'll have a sympathetic chair that will allow you to speak for your 3 minutes. Now we have 2 opportunities to speak. We have this general public comment for items not on the agenda. So if we're not discussing ACA 1 or Prop 13 or taxes, you can go ahead or specific tax. You can go ahead and speak during that time. That usually happens around 10 o'clock in the morning, and you're out of there as soon as you're done speaking. And I love hearing from the community, especially when they bring up questions, because you don't get to answer the question, but then I can bring it up. Afterwards, I can say, hey, what about that question? I'd like to ask our CAO this question about, taxes or whatever. So that's number one. Number two is if we have the legislative platform or if we have the rules of the committee, anything there that you can then look at that item on the agenda. The agendas we were talking about tonight usually come up on Wednesdays or Thursdays. By law, they have to be up by Fridays, but we always try to get them out a little early. You can come and speak on that specific item. And many of you have. I think, I'm looking around the room, and I do have to say that I think Gary, where's Gary?
He's not here.
There he is. So Gary has spoken at every meeting except for the ones that the lawnmower attacked him. And I think he even came all bandaged up like 2 weeks later, bleeding all over the floor. But he got to speak his 3 minutes. And if you don't know, I have to point out that Gary wears some of the best t-shirts to that I've ever seen. And do you buy them for him? Okay, so congratulations that I as chairman, or even when I was chairman before, have always noticed them. So I really want to take a picture of them and put them up online because they're great. And by the way, I should also mention that Debbie nominated Gary to be on our bicycle commission. Yes, we have a bicycle commission. And the Libertarian chairman is on the bicycle commission. And it was the great, because he was questioned. Of all the times, normally we appoint people to these commissions and there's no questions and nobody speaks. But Gary, they wanted to question Gary because he had called into question their ability to do certain things on multiple occasions. And Gary, you were a math professor or a math teacher. So he's a very smart guy. So he got up there and they thought we're going to just destroy him because we're going to talk to him about bicycles. And he went off on the bike lane going through a Atascadero here that's green and over this way, and it didn't make any sense. And he wanted to fix it, and that's why he wants to be on the bicycle commission. And he went on for 10 minutes. And I will tell you that all the supervisors immediately voted for him. And so, I don't know, you've had Mike Brown speak, but Mike is really good talking about the full Bulgarian. The full Bulgarian was a story, and I should I'll tell it real quick, but he does it much better than I do. Mike Brown talks about diplomats at the turn of the last century and how the Bulgarians and all these countries got together and they would argue about all these points and they would paper everybody over and they would just keep talking. And the Bulgarians would just keep it going into the night. But all of these other ambassadors were like, no, we want to go to dinner and have cocktails and relax. And so we're done here. You Bulgarians just go write whatever you want, we'll accept it. That's the full Bulgarian. And so I will tell you that we have a lot of people that, just show up. And finally, you see them, Bruce and Supervisor Gibson, Supervisor Paulding, and Supervisor Ortiz-Legger, just like, okay, whatever, let's move on. I like when you speak. And so I would just recommend that you come and speak on these issues because we need to hear from real people. I don't know where these other folks live. I don't know what the houses they live in, but I don't think they're hearing from real people. Because I go to the grocery store, either Vaughn's or I go up in Paso, the Smart and Final. I'm stopped 3 times. People tell me about how hard it is to live in this county, how tough it is, the insurance rates. Give you an example of insurance rates. Do you know that if you live at Lake Nacimiento, your address is Bradley, California, right? Bradley has higher auto insurance rates than it does Paso Robles. So even though they're in our county, just because the post office that they services them is in Bradley, Monterey County, they have to pay $200 more every 6 months for their auto insurance. So a bunch of them came to me and said, how can we get our postal delivery in Paso so we could save $400 a month? I can't get the Postal Service to move, though. It's a federal office. And we used to be represented by, as you know, years ago by Kevin McCarthy. But I found out about it when Salud Carbajal was our congressman, and we haven't been able to get it done. So we'll keep trying on that. But that just gives you an example. Everything costs more money here. And I don't know how many of you have paid over $7. I paid $7.25 for a gallon of diesel last week. How is that sustainable? It's terrible. And And then the Board of Supervisors gives them 26% raise, pay increase? Where do they live? We're representatives of you. It's not the other way around. You don't represent me. I represent you. You tell me how tough it is, I'm going to go fight for you. So I'm asking you if I could bring out anything. Happy to take some questions, but come to the meetings, talk about this. This is not a hard concept, ACA 1 and the bad things that are happening. And also, you're going to have this probably before the city councils, because the city councils are going to bring up very, very soon probably another tax in each of the cities, the 7 cities. So not only will you have county taxes in November, you'll probably have city taxes in November. And that's just too many taxes. With that, I appreciate the opportunity as always, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, John. What a wonderful, wonderful speech.
John, on the ACA 1, when we vote on it, will that be a 55 or a 2/3 to pass that or revoke it or whatever the language is?
I believe it would be, because it's a constitutional amendment, I believe it's 2/3. But I'll have to check on that, because something in the back of my mind thinks that they may have changed that to 55%. It might be 50% actually. Now that I'm thinking about it, I'm gonna have to check on that. It may be a 50% plus 1. Which, if you think about it, to change it 2/3 vote, because I think when Proposition 13 came into effect in 1978, I think it was a 50% to make it a 2/3. Yeah. I'll have to check on that. I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that.
I am wondering what we can do so that those of us who are unable to attend in person can participate. Back in COVID, we could call in. What can we do so that more people could participate in that way?
Yeah, there's only 2 things. I guess you could wait for the county to say it's a COVID emergency, which is probably coming soon, and then we'll be back in the same place we were 2 years ago. But hopefully not, right? And by the way, if any of you have heard about what's going on with the doctors and healthcare workers, I'm going to try to bring that up to have a discussion about it. So look for that on an upcoming agenda, because I really think that our healthcare workers are being saddled with something that there's not a state mandate for, and I think it's wrong, but we need to hear from the person who did that, which is our health director, to see. But I think the one thing is, you can send us emails. You can send us postcards. You can send us letters. I do read all of them. Vicki also in my office reads all of them. So we do. I can tell you Debbie reads all of them. She's pretty good at that. I don't know about the other 3 supervisors, if they read all the comments that they get. The other thing I think you can do is, if you miss a meeting and come to the next meeting for general public comment, you can talk about something that we've done in the past. We are at a disadvantage, and I always say this, we're at a disadvantage because Republicans seem to work in our county, and it's tougher to take off a day during the day, and it's not a city council meeting, which is easy at nighttime to go to. And so but if you want, and you write something that you think is like Gary, if Gary wrote me a 3-sentence thing, I might actually read it from the podium. I got this from a constituent and this is what he said, kind of thing. And so get me something that's witty and funny and and not 450 words, because I can't do all that, but I'm happy to read it into the record. So.
When I served...
Hi, Gwen.
Hello, John.
How you doing?
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Bill said hello.
Love that guy.
When I served on the Templeton Bond Oversight Committee, there was a provision that even though a bond passed, it could not exceed, and I believe it was 1% of a person's property tax. So therefore, in Templeton, when that school bond passed, we could not implement the entire amount at once because the combined values of the school district was not sufficient. We literally had to wait for appreciation of the market. Will anything that's being proposed change that protection for property owners?
It could, yes. And that's, once again, I mean, that's the whole purpose of it, is to, you know, they're trying to chip away at all of these. It's this thirst for more money, more of your money, right? And my bigger thing is that I know every single person in here is probably a pretty good money manager. Darsha's probably the best. I'm just telling you right now, knowing her like I know her, I can guarantee it. But you know, when she's looking for 1 vote, right, or 13 votes, I know she knows where everything is. So, it's a chip away at everything, Gwen. And you know that right now, if you put your tax dollars into the county through property tax, 60% of it goes to the schools anyway. You know, I don't know if you know that. I think the county gets 25%, but 61% goes to the schools. And so, and then the schools ask for bonds, you know, to be able to build and do infrastructure. And by the way, I should answer the question about the fire department in Templeton, which we love our fire department, but they're going to have to come back for another one here pretty soon because costs are skyrocketing, you know? So that's going to come back onto the ballot. And if they, you know, they had to get 2/3 last time, they may, if this passes, they probably can get 55% because it's infrastructure. Wow. So, you know, right there, you know, they had a number of these, including the sales tax increase from last year that was the self-help county to go to roads that SloCog wants. And SloCog is actually the one kind of driving the discussion on the self-help county, which if you're not familiar with SloCog, San Luis Obispo County Council of Governments is what it is. So there's 7 representatives, 1 from each of the cities, and then the 5 supervisors, and Caltrans, and then they figure out where the money goes. My problem with SloCog always has been, and they're good people, but there's always somebody on the board there that wants to take all the money for the North County roads and move it down to the Pismo Beach 101 freeway where the traffic is, you know? And it's always been there. I don't know what they're going to do. Maybe multi-levels, you know, maybe a monorail. So you never know. You can never stop them.
John, the ACA, what did the Board of Supervisors have to do with that? Last month, I think there was some kind of vote, since it's being voted on in the state legislature.
Yeah, it was on the state legislative platform. So our platform has always said pretty much we'll do anything to protect Prop 13. So do not support any lobbying, you know, do not, when you lobby our lobbyist, your lobbyist, when you go in and talk to an assembly member, you should always say that we support Prop 13 and will do nothing to endanger it. Well, now they've changed that. So our lobbyist, now it's silent on it, so our lobbyists can talk to the Dem legislators up there and can talk to them and tell them, oh yeah, we'd be supportive, or, you know, we're silent on the issue, so do whatever you want to Prop 13.
Hey, John, I'd like to ask a question about they have a policy in government that when they hand out money to certain, like education or whatever the department is, once you're granted that amount of money, if you don't use it, then you're penalized against it. So what I'm saying is they penalize frugality. So I can remember as a construction worker, I tore walls down, built them up 5 or 6 feet over, put them back up again, and the following year, tear it down and bring it back over again. Have it explained to me that if we don't spend the money, we are penalized against it. So our government penalizes frugality. It encourages waste.
It's a very, very good point. And a lot of times we will get grants that if we don't use them within a certain time, they have to be returned, right? And I will tell you this, though. You have a constitutional officers here in San Luis Obispo County. Your county assessor, Tom Bordenaro, he returns between $300,000 and $1 million, $300,000 to $1 million every year, probably for the last 7 years of his budget, to the county general fund. The sheriff does the same thing. All of these departments, they will return the money. And so then what happens is it comes to the board, right? And so the board has it, and then we use it to fill our overspending. And that's the biggest problem. This year, this is gonna be, and I actually was very happy with this, because people were talking, we spent some ARPA money last year. I'm actually glad we spent it. I'm glad it's gone, because this year we're gonna be forced to actually make some real cuts. And they don't wanna have that argument. They don't wanna have that discussion. We have a number, and I've said this about the inclusionary housing tax, which anybody who's a contractor understands this. If you build a house of a certain size, they tax you so they can build affordable housing for people that are disadvantaged, okay? The program was tried for 3 years. It did not work. Over all that time, I think it raised $300,000. Didn't build one house for a disadvantaged community family member. But what ended up happening was Debbie Lynn and I sunsetted it, so it's gone. So we're not paying, nobody pays it on a new house right now. Bruce Gibson, Supervisor Gibson, and Supervisor Paulding have asked that it come back. And they're gonna bring it back up, and they'll have the votes for it. Well, I need people there to point out that this is a failed program. We have failed programs in San Luis Obispo County that we are going to need to look at, cut that funding, and not spend that money. And that's where we are. We're getting low on our rainy day funds, to be able to deal with any kind of thing that happens. We've had, in 2008, they had to actually lay people off after the economy there. They furlough people. They had to, fix some things and make some things work. And they were able to survive it, but they didn't learn any lessons. And that to me is the biggest problem, is that their memory is so short. We can't keep doing this. And then you put in national politics, where you take and you put Joe Biden in, and Biden economics versus Trump economics. I mean, there's no difference. I will tell you, my 401k looked brilliant, 4 years ago. And it is a disaster right now, So I gotta continue to work, which is okay. I like the job. So.
One more.
This is gonna be kind of a weird one. Okay,
I like weird ones.
okay.
I'm on the board of supervisors.
I know you are. Okay, okay. We all see and we read and we hear about the corruption all over the country, all over the state, and all these different boards and things doing shenanigans. And you're sitting there shaking your head saying, why doesn't somebody do something? Well, number one, Bruce Gibson breaks the law almost every meeting. Me being the chairman of the Republican Party, I know about noticing, I know about what you can and can't say. So if something isn't agendized, you can't talk about it. You can't talk about it. Even if someone brings it up, you can't do it. And he breaks that law all the time. Well, nothing happens to him. Well, now you're talking about SloCog. Remember when Andrea's group, the Taxpayers Association, they fought that last increase tooth and nail, and they were probably the reason that
I agree. They were the reason.
Didn't get 2/3. Well, I remember at one board meeting, and actually when you were chair, that we had a speaker there from SloCog, and he handed out flyers to vote for this tax. So a government agency is paying to have flyers made up to have their citizens pay for a tax. That's illegal.
It is illegal. And that's actually one of the main reasons why Dan Dow has set up a public integrity unit, because the only way to deal with this, I believe, is through basically through the district attorney's office and the public integrity unit and the laws that they are responsible for. And I've told, so Greg Graywall brought up, I think, 5 or 6 different Brown Act violations, and he has forwarded them to that. I think they've only resolved one of them that they found that was not. I think the investigation continues for 5. I don't actually know how that's going. I know too that there's, and there are people in this room that probably have said they'd send stuff to Dan Dow, but he is county government. And so I've asked them if they want to send it to me. I can get it to the U.S. attorney. His name is Thomas Robichaud down in Los Angeles. I think Darcia is very familiar with him. And so, but he's really good. He's actually the one that followed through on the Adam Hill investigation, and he's the one that raided the offices of the San Luis Obispo County Board of Supervisors. They didn't go into my office, by the way. Not that there's anything in my office. Actually, technically, I think it's your office, the first district office. But I would say that if you see those, you need to bring them to the attention of law enforcement so they can be investigated. This is also the same office that caught the Brown Act violation out at the Shandon San Juan Water District meeting, where they went into closed session to discuss something that should not be discussed in closed session, needed to be in the open, and they got fined. And so I will tell you this, that if you're comfortable, get it over to those folks. If you're not, I can give you the phone number for Thomas Robichaud at the U.S. Attorney's Office down in Los Angeles, or you can get it to me and I can get it to the proper authorities too. We also have a civil grand jury, and they do a really good job of pointing out problems within our structure. And we always respond to their reports. I read all of the reports that come in from the civil grand jury. We don't have a criminal grand jury, that has to be called. We have a civil grand jury. But I will tell you this, that I believe that they also have a really good ability to point out problems and have them picked up by the media, so there's actually a public communication and discussion. And so those would be the three things that I'd recommend. But I agree, having lived through the Adam Hill deal, where he was, they raided his home, they raided his house, he attempted suicide but survived. They built up the case. They had text messages. He was actually texting from the podium to one of the cannabis guys saying, I just delivered this vote for you. I want, money now. And they brought 40 grand over to his house the next night, So he got caught. And by the way, it was the guy he texted is the one that gave that information to the FBI. They came and interviewed me, they interviewed Debbie, they interviewed Lynn. I hadn't been there long enough, so you could only imagine the stories Lynn and Debbie had. But it was a very, very low point in the Board of Supervisors. He brought shame upon the Board of Supervisors. I still have people come up to me and say, you were a member of this corrupt board, But what it is, and I don't take, there's a lot of money I don't take on my campaigns. I just don't do it. I tell you the truth, I don't even take my cell phone onto the podium, so I don't text people. So you can't text me and say, hey, say this, because I leave it up in the office, because that's all admissible information. So if you did a records request, I would have to turn over my text messages to you. And my son just told me that he's be home at 8 o'clock from practice and he wants habit. That's what you're going to get from me. I don't know about the other guys, but that's what you'll end up getting from me, right? But I do give out my cell phone to everybody. So I will tell you that if you have information like what Randall's talking about, you can call me at 805-440-7818, or you can text me at that number. Just tell me who you are and what the deal is. I put my cell phone on both elections. I put it on over 250,000 pieces of mail. And I got precisely 3 phone calls. I think people want to have my number, they don't want to use it. I'm just asking you to use it. If you find things that don't sit right with you, that aren't right, call me and let me know. Because I talk to Debbie 20 times a day now. We're hunkered down. I make sure she takes the other elevator and I go with her, and we're all good. And we're just going to keep fighting, because that's what it is. Somebody asked me, how's this year going as chairman? And I said, I'm saying no a lot. And that's what I can do. And I can point out that we have problems, that a lot of things that they believe are failed policies that they're trying to bring back, or they failed at other locations. And especially with Bruce Gibson, as you know, is going to be the head of the California State Association of Counties. So he's going to be the CSAC chairman next year. So he's going to come back with 1,000 bad ideas. And we've got to make sure that there's actually somebody that probably passed, but there's got to be people that speak out against them. I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I appreciate everybody's time.